We're going to divide 5x to the fourth minus 3x to the third plus 63x squared. No, wait, I forgot a term. 6x squared plus 63x plus 53, and that is being divided by 5x plus 7. What do you notice that's different about this problem? Okay, but what else do you notice? I can't even repeat what you said. By the way, watch your language. Wasn't too bad, but the number in front of the x, the coefficient of x, is not 1. So I need to think, what do I multiply 5 by to get 5? 1. Then the next thing I need to think of is, what do I multiply x by to get x to the fourth? X to the third. So the common mistake that's made is we forget to multiply by both terms. Remember, 5x is a term and positive 7 is a term. We have to multiply by both terms. So 1 times 5 is 5. X to the third power times x to the first power is actually x to the fourth power. We're not done. I've got to multiply this by this. So 1x cubed times 7 is actually 7x cubed, positive 7x cubed. Now what I've done, and this is what you should do too, what fascinates me post-COVID is that kids don't know how to use their notes when they're doing their homework. So we have a bunch of example problems like this done. So you just click on an example problem that we did in class. Notice that after we multiply everything out, at every stage we add the opposites. So that means we have to do the opposites, right? We have to do the opposites. So to do the opposites, I've got to change this into a negative, and I've got to change this into a negative. Most common mistake, right here. That's the most common mistake. People forget to change the sign of that second term. If you do everything correctly, this first term will either cancel out or it's a remainder. If you can't cancel it out, then it's part of the remainder and you go from there. But most of the time, you know, for the first couple of terms, that's going to cancel out. So it does 5x to the fourth power minus 5x to the fourth power equals 0. But now I've got a negative 3 and a negative 7. If you are not the greatest at positive and negative numbers, do it in the calculator. Negative 3 plus negative 7 equals negative 10. Negative 10 what? X to the third. You too. Quick, get going. Pay attention. Negative 10 x to the third. There's nothing funny about polynomial long division. It's a serious business. Now, I know to drop down the next term, but you might not remember what to do next. Guess what? You have an example. When you do this, the next step is to drop this down. We don't drop it down until we've added the inverses or opposites. So I look at that example, and then I go, okay, what did I do next? And it might take you a minute to remember. If it takes you a minute to remember and you remember it, that means you've learned. Okay? So now, same thing, I need to think, what do I multiply 5 by to get a negative 10? Remember, that negative sign is attached to the term. Negative 2. Hold on a second. All right, so now what we need to do is, it is negative 2, but the next thing we need to think about is, what do I multiply x to the first power by to get x to the third power? 2. So this becomes x squared. Multiply it out, right? I'm going to say negative 2 times 5. What's that? Negative 10. Next step, x squared times x to the first power. What's that? X to the third. Now we got to repeat that. Negative 2 times positive 7. Negative 14. And then lastly, this is the tricky part. This x squared doesn't get multiplied by anything else, but we don't throw this away. We tack it on. Okay? We tack it on. So this is actually negative 14x squared. Now, one of the things that I would do, this is something that Mr. Adams did as a student. If I couldn't remember what to do here, I'd look at my notes and I'd go, oh, add opposites. And I would write it down in my homework. I would say add. I might abbreviate it like add opposites or add ops or whatever. And I'd point it here and I'd point it here. And then I would go and say, oh yeah, so it's negative, so to make it the opposite, I got to change the sign to positive. Now, if you do everything right, the most common mistake, somebody's not going to change this sign. They'll change this one because they know this needs to cancel somehow, but you have to do it to both terms. Anyways, this does add up to 0. And then what's 6 plus 14? 20. 20 what? X squareds. Right? X squareds represent something. Think of it like pencils, right? Like if I had 3 pencils and I had 2 more pencils, I have 5. 5 what? Pencils. It's the same thing except we're saying x squared. Okay? So then, again, we go back. What do I multiply 5 by to get positive 20? Positive 4. So I'm right plus. Okay, next step. What do I multiply x to the first power by to get x to the second power? Yeah, x to the first power, right? Just put x. You could think of it as x to the 1, right? Like, there's no harm in thinking of it as x to the first power. You could even write it down. I don't care. But anyways, now we multiply it out. What's 4 times 5? 20. What's x times x? X squared. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? We got to bring this down, so this becomes a positive 63x. I would have remembered. So now I've got to multiply 4 times 7. What's that? 28. Positive 28. And then this x doesn't go away. We tack it on. Next thing we do, add the opposite. So this becomes negative, and this becomes negative. These cancel, and then, I don't know, that's too big of a number for me to do in my head. Why would I? I'm just going to add them up. So I'm going to say 63 minus 28, it's 35. 35 what? 35 x's. Now we're going to tack on this 53. Now I'm pretty sure we're going to have a remainder because 53 is a prime number. Okay? But I do the same thing that I've been doing. What do I multiply 5 by to get 35?
7.
What kind of 7? Positive 7, right? And then x and x. So I can't put another x here because then it would make it x squared. So let's just multiply it out. 7 times 5x is 35x. What's 7 times 7?
49.
Positive 49. What do I do next? Add the opposite. So this becomes negative. This becomes negative. 53 minus 49 is 4. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So my remainder is 4. So what's my answer? Well, it's x cubed minus 2x squared plus 4x plus 7 plus 4 over to the divisor, which is 5x plus 7. Which should be A. Does anybody have any questions on that one? So that's probably the hardest problem from the homework.